This month in our devotions, we are focusing on vision. Today's devotion is titled Foundations of Vision. I'll be sharing from Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2, which says, "Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it." Now, vision for us is, in Christian terms, is a picture of a future state or reality. It's what can be. And vision is intended to shape our values, our priorities, our strategies, our membership, and our partnerships. As we think about vision, I would like to think about the Hebrew people who, after hundreds of years in captivity in Egypt, God delivers them through his mighty hand and through the ministry of Moses, brings them out and brings them to the wilderness of Sinai, to the foot of Mount Sinai, before he gives them the law in Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 and 6. He says, "Look, if you'll obey my voice and keep my covenant, you'll be my treasured possession among all peoples." And then he goes on to say, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." So God gives them the big picture. This is your purpose. I am going to take you as the Hebrew people, as the nation of Israel. I'm going to place you amongst other nations, and you're going to serve as a nation of priests. Not a nation with priests, but a nation of priests. Meaning that they would mediate between God and those nations amongst whom God placed them. That's the big purpose of the Hebrew people. Now then God says, to get there, part of this big plan is that you have a slightly smaller vision, and that is, I'm going to deliver a land to you that is a land that flows with milk and honey. This is where I am placing you. It's going to sustain you. It will be a blessing to you. You will be a blessing to those nations around you, and this area will be your base of operations. And so God gives them the law at Mount Sinai and then guides them to the edge of the promised land where the spies are sent in. I think this is in Numbers chapter 13-ish. They go in and spy out the land, and then the spies come back. One of them, Caleb, says, "Oh, it's a land that's just like God said, flows with milk and honey. Look at the fruit that came from the land. It's great. God is with us. Let's go in and take it." The other spies bring a bad report, and they say, "No, we can't. It's a land that swallows its inhabitants. It's filled with giants. We can't take it." So they turn away from what God had placed before them as their vision for where they're going to go and where they're going to set up their base of operations to be that blessing among the nations. They came right up to the edge of it and then turned away. They even said within the congregation, "Let us select another leader to take us back to Egypt." What a sad story. And so as we think about vision, I want us to think about just four things really quickly. There's a lot more we could say, but just four things really quickly. First of all, vision must be based in God's plan, or said another way, in his story. God is writing a divine drama, a divine story that starts from the fall and goes all the way to the restoration of all things. The new heaven and the new earth. This is God's story. We know the beginning, we know the problem, we know the climax of Jesus Christ and the crucifixion and resurrection, we know the resolution and the end of the story. But what we're not so clear about are all the details between where we are today and that final culmination. What we also may not be clear on is where we fit in God's big story. So when we talk about vision, we're looking at who God is, what he's doing, and we're trying to determine what role is God desiring for us to play within his drama. Where do we fit into what God is doing in the world? That's vision. As a church, as a family, or as an organization like One Mission Society, where do we fit in God's story? That's our vision. So the second thing I want us to recognize is that vision must be shared. How many times have we seen a pastor come into a church, an existing church, he comes in as a new pastor with some vision that he created, not even knowing that church, and he tries to force that vision like Saul's armor on his congregation, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work in mission agencies, it doesn't work in businesses, it just doesn't work. Vision looks at God, at who he is, the story he's writing, where we fit in it, and it looks at the people and says, we're all in this together. Vision has to be shared. The people have to buy into it. We have to have skin in the game, and we have to be able to say, this is who we are. This is where we fit. This is our role in God's story, and we're willing to obey, we're willing to trust, and we're willing to sacrifice to move forward. Vision must be shared. Now, this shared vision demands trust. I just mentioned that. We have to trust God. This is the level of faith. We believe that God is with us. He's called us to this, and we're willing to follow him even into some difficult circumstances. Shared vision demands trust. Not only trust in God, but in one another. In an agency or in a church, you have to be able to trust from the pastor down to the newest member in an organization, from the top leadership all the way down to the newest, not down, but from the top leadership to the newest missionary. We have to have a level of trust that we are together on this and we love one another and trust one another, and we're moving forward to fulfill the vision that God has for us. And lastly, I just want to point out that shared vision also demands obedience. So we look at those Hebrew people, and they didn't fully trust God. God said, I've shown them miracles and I've delivered them out of Egypt, and yet they've put me to the test these 10 times. None of them are going to see the promised land. That was God's judgment. God wants us to trust Him and have faith in Him, but we also have to obey. How many times in your life did you have the faith to believe in God? You trusted Him. You just didn't really want to obey what He was asking you to do. Shared vision demands that level of obedience that is willing to sacrifice, that's willing to suffer in obedience to who God has called us to be and what He's called us to do. Vision gives us an idea of all of this as we play this role within God's divine drama, and we do this all the way to the point of fulfilling what God has for us until our dying breath. I don't know where you are today in your walk with the Lord or how you're feeling, but I know these Hebrew people were excited about the promised land God promised them up until the point where it required deep trust and risky obedience, and they turned away. I am pleading, imploring, and encouraging you, don't turn back to Egypt. Press on, trust the Lord, trust one another, and take those steps of obedience so that together we may enjoy the fruit of the land, the milk and honey that God is providing and promising after a long and arduous journey of faithfulness in a single direction.